What is your butt weight? It gets worse story. My soul locked his keys in his car about 6 weeks ago. Well, only the hidden key that lives inside the fob. But you see, the unlock key on the fob is broken, so the key is required to enter the car, and the fob fits into the ignition. He had no other choice than to open the trunk with the fob, punch out the small trunk access door that's behind the backseat armrest, find the lever to lower the rear seats by shoving his body through the tiny door, crawl through the car, and retrieve his key in the front seat. I also forgot to mention that the alarm was blaring this whole time. He finally gets through to the front seat, starts the car, and kills the alarm. Exhausted, with bloody knuckles and scrapes all over, he gets out of the car and shuts the door behind him. It is then that he realized he had left the keys on the seat. Again. And the door had locked behind him. He turned and gave a swift punt to his tire out of frustration, immediately snapping his third metatarsal, breaking his foot. He then had to repeat this scenario to get his keys out, this time with a broken foot. He just got his boot off last week. I'm sorry, but this story is hilarious, and in a year or so you will cry from laughing at this story. I've been laughing since the day it happened. I also have to preface his story with it's okay. You can laugh whenever he tells someone else. Got my first ever blowjob from my first ever girlfriend in college. We were both drunk, and I also did not know what a blowjob would feel like. It didn't feel the best, and I was starting to fall asleep, so I told her I had came to end it, and we fell asleep. Woke up the next morning, and jumped in the shower, and experienced what felt like hot lava on my raw-skinned dick. She had used teeth the whole time, and it was rubbing off the skin on the underside of my penis with every bob of her neck. But wait, it gets worse. The next day we go to a football game, and she isn't her normal self, not holding my hand or really talking to me. We get back, and she comes up to my app to tell me that she cheated on me with my best friend I had at college, and we broke up, leaving me alone with my raw dick that took 2 weeks to heal. How do you fake cum in a girl's mouth? Got rear-ended by a truck. Pulled over to check my trunk on a hilly street. A car parked behind me rolled downhill and crushed me between it and my newly messed up trunk. Suffered some cracked ribs. Jesus Christ. You're lucky your whole ghost didn't fall out. That's a new one for me. My wraparound skirt blew away while I was walking down the sidewalk. But wait. It gets worse. It happened right in front of a funeral home. And yes, there were at least 24 mourners filing into the building as I chased my skirt down the sidewalk in my panties. I'm sure you have them some comic relief. And the deceased dad responsible. Okay, it's been 15 minutes that I've been trying to figure out what you're trying to say with that last sentence and I give up. The ghost of deceased dad don't know why it's a dad ripped it off her? I posted this a long time ago, but here it is again. I was working for a large hotel chain in London for a few weeks, shooting interiors/exteriors for their brochures, and I'd end up going from hotel to hotel meeting manager/assistants who would take me round the hotel all day while I took my photos. Knowing full well that no one works in a hotel without acquiring some pretty amazing stories, I would interrogate each one for their most outrageous tales. I got to hear a bunch of stories that ranged from fascinating to dull. The orgies, the famous faces cheating on their spouses, the occasional slaughtered goat in the bath, incredibly more common than you might think. And the time that the cast of Friends stayed at the hotel while they were filming those episodes in London. One story rose above the rest. A gentleman, alone in his suite, woke up in the middle of the night with a dire need to unload his bowels. I mean a really, really desperate need. To the point that he must have woken up in a panic as he jumped out of bed, but naked, bolted for the bathroom door and burst inside. Except he didn't. In his tired state, and no doubt thanks to his unfamiliarity with the hotel room, he bolted for the front door of the room by mistake and let the door shut behind him. Now this man who both, let's not forget, feels an agonizing rumbling in his intestines and is as naked as the day he was born, suddenly finds himself in the corridor and panics. Understandably. His desire to speak is so strong that it overwhelms any other thought going through his head. He must poop. He starts banging like a maniac on a neighboring door, hoping someone will answer, and eventually, someone does. A man opens up the door, probably assuming that a fire has started in the hotel and he's being woken up for an emergency evacuation. And in a sense, he's half right. Our naked hero bursts into the room, pushing past the confused and bewildered occupant, apologizing along the way, and makes a break for the bathroom. But no. He doesn't make it. Halfway there, his sphincter gives in to the pressure and he unloads a spray of effluent across the floor of the stranger. Some of the foulest smelling waste imaginable is dumped all over the place in a mottled line, leading to the toilet. The room's original occupant, who was up until this point, standing scared, bewildered and confused by the door still, immediately vomited. To his credit, the digestively challenged man did make it to the sitting position in the bathroom, and sat there, crying and apologizing to the vomiting man and eventually the hotel staff, for a full 10 minutes, while his gut punished him for some earlier indiscretion. When the speepter had finished, the hotel moved the speepee's belongings, some of which were speckled with the speepter's feces, to a new room, and I assume that the speepter had a nice long shower. But wait, it gets worse. In the morning after the debacle, the speepter walked into the restaurant for breakfast, and who should be there but last night's victim, sat eating his cornflakes. The two apparently locked eyes, whereupon last night's memories must have come flooding back to the victim with a vengeance, because the poor man, in the middle of a crowded room full of people enjoying their food, immediately vomited all over the table. This is quite possibly the best and the worst thing I've ever read. Then you should read the steakhouse incident. Oh my god. That was incredible. Thank you. So I found out I had a huge tumor on my ovary. It was growing hair. Then I got surgery to remove it, and they found out I had stage 4 endometriosis, which would severely impact future fertility. Then I go home in extreme pain. I go to the ER that night, because I'm doubled over, and screaming in pain. The ER tells me it's residual gas from the laparoscopy. So then I sit on my recliner for 3 days crying out in pain, and vomiting every single thing I try to ingest. Not farting or belching at all, like you need to do after a laparoscopy, to get rid of the excess gas used to inflate the area they work on. Then I have enough, and get my husband to take me to a different hospital. They do a scan with contrast dye. Boy, was that difficult to keep down long enough for the scan, and they find out that I'm bleeding internally and leaking poo into my abdominal cavity. Then I get taken in for emergency surgery. Before the surgery I'm informed that there is also a huge tumor in the middle of my right ovary and would have to have it out. I could either do it then, or at a later date. I opt to do it then. I wake up from the surgery after 4 days in a medically induced coma in a different hospital in the ICU. I'm intubated and have a nasogastric tube. I panic and I see a nurse in the hall, but can't get her attention. I undo my restraint on my left hand and yank out the tubes. You can rip out your vocal cords by doing that. Luckily I didn't, and yell for help. Then I proceed to spend weeks in the hospital recovering, eating nothing but soup broth. I eventually get upgraded to ensure I get MRSA in the surgical wound, and it takes a few rounds of very strong antibiotics to contend with it. A bunch of my hair falls out. I go home and can't bathe for a few weeks because the incision is still pretty much open. They didn't stitch the skin together. I have to have a home health nurse visit me every day to clean the wounds. It takes about a year to heal. I keep getting recurring MRSA infections in the top of the incision site inside of my belly button. Whenever the MRSA comes back, my belly button oozes a ton of pus and blood and forms a giant, painful boil. It's been 2 years and this speep is still happening. Edit. I just wanted to clarify that my intestine was lacerated during the initial surgery for my ovary. Edit 2. I should add that I also accidentally spread the MRSA to my husband, my primary caretaker at home, and then to my kids. So that's another way in which this story kept getting worse. Now they have recurring MRSA infections in their sinuses and throats. I also lost my license because I had gotten a speeding ticket and had to take a class, which I did, and needed to mail within the certificate in a certain span of time, which happened to be while I was hospitalized. Now I have a ton of court and DMV fees that I have slowly been working on paying. Still can't drive because we have not been able to get the funds together to pay it. Wow, that's awful. I sincerely hope things improve for you. Thanks. I really just want to get this belly button MRSA kicked. I'd been seeing doctors about it, and I was overweight, so they were having a hard time seeing or palpating it. But holy crap, could I ever feel it. I've lost weight, so it's much easier to see now. Recently I got put on meds to fight MRSA on my arm, and seems to have knocked it out in my belly button for now. It's been 2 weeks. Hopefully it stays that way. When I was fighting my MRSA outbreak for 2 years, I finally went to the ER with over 60 sores all over my body. I'm telling you this to maybe give you some helpful info. I got sent to an infectious disease expert near the hospital. Sounds scary, but she really helped. In tandem with several antibiotics, they gave me rifampin as the only one I remember. At this point I'd been on about 8 different things. I bathed 2 or maybe 3 times a day in hibiclans. Letting it dry on your skin. Once it dries you can leave it, or wash it off. Drying is important. So what this did, as explained to me, was basically kill frickin' everything, the good and the bad. With everything dead I could then try to grow good bacteria to outweigh the bad. I took a lot of probiotics too. I had to keep everything in the house pretty clean too. I think I still have the instructions for everything I did, if you want to PM me. I haven't had any MRSA sores/boils in about 3 years. When we had to put down our family dog of 12 years, and on the drive home, my parents told my brother and I that they were separating. Edit. To all 2,000 people who had to reply to this and say my parents are terrible people. No, they're not. This happened when I was 18, and if they hadn't stayed together because they both wanted the dog, I would have had to go through that when I was still in high school. So I really don't see how I was wronged here. So when should we tell the kids we're getting divorced? What about after we take the dog to get put down? Oh yeah. I mean, they are already going to be sad. That's a perfect moment. They only need to be sad once. It's just efficient. Really. My oldest sister was murdered. But wait. It gets worse. Her husband was, unbeknownst to us, a high-functioning alcoholic. He quickly became an unable-to-function-at-all alcoholic. But wait. It gets worse. They had 5 children. The oldest called me from the dentist's office, where my brother-in-law was being arrested for driving the kids there while intoxicated. But wait. It gets worse. I can't take custody of the children, because I live out of state. Even if I pack up my family and move, we would have to be residents for 6 months before we could be vetted as foster parents. So the children go into foster care. But wait. It gets worse. There was not a foster family available that willing to take 5 children together. They went to 3 separate families. These kids lost their mother permanently, and their father and siblings temporarily. Edited based on responses to ad. This occurred 13 years ago. My brother-in-law was not the murderer. He was and is a very decent man who at the time had poor stress management skills. He drank to cope with the stress of everyday life and went completely off the rails when my sister died, leaving him to raise 5 children on his own. They did catch the murderer. He pleaded guilty and passed away in prison before his first parole hearing. We never learned the motive. Please tell me they're doing better now. They are. My brother-in-law went to rehab and pulled himself together. The oldest 3 are in college or graduate school. The youngest 2 are doing extremely well in high school. They all needed many years of therapy. But in my extended family there is absolutely no stigma associated with needing the help of a mental health professional. So they got the help they needed. But wait. It gets better. Yay.